limit is t goes to 4 of 1 divided by the square root of t plus 12 minus 1 over 4 divided by 16 minus t squared. First thing we're going to do is try plugging a 4 in for each of the t's. That will give us 1 divided by the square root of 4 plus 12 minus 1 over 4 all over 16 minus 4 squared. 1 divided by the square root of 4 plus 12 is 16 minus 1 over 4 divided by 16 minus 4 squared, which is a 16. Square root of 16 is a 4, so we have 1 over 4 minus 1 over 4 divided by 16 minus 16, which is going to give us the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. We will have to rework this. Since we have a fraction involving t in some way, together with at least one other fraction, we can try the common denominator method. So we're going to produce the common denominator between those terms, and the common denominator looks like it'll be the square root of t plus 12 times a 4. So we're going to multiply this first fraction by 4 over 4, and the second fraction by square root of t plus 12 over the square root of t plus 12. This will allow us to add those fractions together all over that same denominator of 16 minus t squared. So we have limit as t goes to 4 of multiplying fractions. The numerator is multiplied. 4 times 1 is a 4. 4 times the square root of t plus 12 is 4 times the square root of t plus 12 minus in the numerator 1 times the square root of t plus 12, and then over the same common denominator 4 times the square root of t plus 12. All of that divided by 16 minus t squared. Our next step is to combine these fractions together into a single fraction. 4 minus the square root of t plus 12 all over 4 times the square root of t plus 12, and then the entire thing divided by 16 minus t squared. After having done the common denominator and put the fraction over the common denominator, the next step would be to reciprocate the denominator fraction and multiply with the numerator fraction. The denominator is not a fraction just yet, but we can make it a fraction by putting it over 1, so I will do that, so that in our next step we can reciprocate and multiply. So we will have the limit as t goes to 4 of 4 minus the square root of t plus 12 divided by 4 times the square root of t plus 12, and then multiply this by the reciprocal of the denominator, which will be 1 over 16 minus t squared. So that gives us limit as t goes to 4 of, in the numerator, 4 minus the square root of t plus 12 times 1 will give us 4 minus the square root of t plus 12. In the denominator, we will have 4 times the square root of t plus 12 times the quantity of 16 minus t squared. Alright, so we've finished the common denominator. We should still have 0 over 0. The common denominator does not fix the 0 over 0, and that will continue to be the 0 over 0 indeterminate form until we cancel something out. If you plug the 4 in, we're still getting a 0 in the numerator. The square root of 16 is a 4. And we're still getting a 0 in the denominator from the 16 minus t squared. 4 squared is 16. So we still have to continue to rework this. Now, at this point, we have a root combination, a root involving the variable t in some way added or subtracted together with at least one other term. We have to use the root conjugate method. So we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by the root conjugate, which is the same terms in the root combination, but opposite sign between them. So we have limit as t goes to 4 of, in the numerator, those are root conjugates. We're going to FOIL that out. First, 4 times 4 is a 16. Outside, 4 times the square root of t plus 12. Inside, negative square root of t plus 12 times a 4. And then last, negative square root of t plus 12 times a positive square root of t plus 12 is a negative of the quantity of t plus 12. Make sure to put that in parentheses. In the denominator, we have 4 times the square root of t plus 12 times 16 minus t squared times 4 plus the square root of t plus 12. After a root conjugate FOIL, the outside and inside terms will always cancel, so let's cancel those out. And our next step is we're going to distribute the minus sign into the expression here in the numerator. So that gives us limit as t goes to 4 of 16 minus t minus 12 divided by that entire denominator, which I'll rewrite exactly as we see it here. And now in the numerator we can combine like terms together. So we have limit as t goes to 4 of 16 minus 12 is a 4, so we will have a 4 minus t. In the denominator, 4 times the square root of t plus 12 times a 16 minus t squared times a 4 plus the square root of t plus 12 . Okay, so we still have 0 over 0. Root conjugates do not eliminate the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. But these have turned into power functions at this point. We have a 0 in the numerator because of this, and we have a 0 in the denominator because of this difference of squares. They can't cancel just yet, but the difference of squares does factor, and that will be our next step. We're going to factor, and I believe we will see the cancellation happening. The 4 minus t factor is what is making 0 in the numerator, and I expect the same to be happening in the denominator. The difference of squares factors into a 4 plus t and a 4 minus t. And now we can cancel out the 4 minus t's in the numerator and denominator, leaving us with a 1 in the numerator. So we have limit as t goes to 4 of 1 divided by 4 times the square root of t plus 12 times 4 plus t times 4 plus the square root of t plus 12. We've eliminated the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. We should now be able to plug a 4 in for each of the t's. So we have 1 divided by 4 times the square root of 4 plus 12 times 4 plus 4 times 4 plus the square root of 4 plus 12. This will give us 1 divided by 4 times root 16 after you add 4 and 12. 4 plus 4 is an 8. And then 4 plus the square root of 4 plus 12 is 16. I can multiply this 8 and this 4. And that will give us a 32. The square root of 16 is a 4. And then 4 plus, again, the square root of 16, which is a 4. Four times 32 is 128. and 4 plus 4 is an 8, and we get 1 divided by 1024.